Hello, everybody. My name is Jeff Jadess with the Spring Stewardship Institute in Flagstaff, Arizona, and we've been hoping to use drones to construct 3D models of spring habitats. I'd like to show you some of what we've learned so far. Now, the Spring Stewardship Institute is dedicated to advancing understanding and stewardship of spring ecosystems, and to support this mission, and with the support and cooperation of numerous NGOs and several local, state, and federal agencies, we host a comprehensive and widely used database of spring data. Now, our database, Springs Online, allows users to store extensive information on the spring locations and surrounding areas, and history of survey information showing how flow, water quality, species observed, and management issues change over time. As of October 2022, we and our partners have compiled a database of almost 160,000 springs and over 23,000 surveys. Now, the digital twin, the concept of a digital twin, or a three-dimensional digital representation of an object or environment, has been gaining popularity recently in GIS, land management, and general spatial analysis. Software companies are developing sophisticated tools for generating these 3D models using LiDAR and structure from motion photogrammetrical techniques. LiDAR builds a 3D model by firing a laser and measuring the time it takes for the reflected light to return, similar to radar. Structure from motion techniques build a 3D model by looking at multiple overlapping images taken from different locations and at different angles. Conceptually, this is similar to how our brain can interpret a three-dimensional environment around us when we view it through two slightly offset eyes, and the underlying concept should be familiar to anyone who's ever played with those old ViewMaster toys as a kid. Now, software now can take a set of overlapping photographs and generate millions of 3D points from them. And from these points, we can generate a 3D model of the shape of the land. Now, we're excited to investigate the utility of digital twins of springs to see if these could provide new perspective and interesting new information, and drones can certainly aid in visualizing springs that are difficult or dangerous to reach, so maybe on or around cliff sides. And the photogrammetric capabilities of many software packages meant that we might be able to generate a detailed 3D model of the local landscape around the spring. And this, we were hoping, could give us accurate measures of slope, aspect, local topographic ruggedness, and flow paths. Now, as for methods, we would have liked to test a LiDAR solution, but to our knowledge, no such solution exists for small drones, and definitely not on our budget. And while small drones are not terribly expensive, they are not exactly cheap either. But at least the drone itself, equipped with a camera, was in our budget, and we felt that a drone-based structure from motion analysis based on multiple overlapping photographs would be the only affordable alternative. We used a DJI Mavic 2 drone to capture digital images, and then we tried two different software packages to convert the images to 3D models. We wanted to compare these two software packages to see which would work better for us. Now, the first software package was a popular commercial product. This is Esri's Drone-to-Map software, which at the time was built from the industry standard Pix4D engine, and which simplifies and streamlines that Pix4D modeling process. Drone-to-Map is a commercial product sold by Esri. The standard price is $3,500 per year for the version that produces 3D models, though you might be able to get a discounted price through Esri's various grant programs. It installs on Windows computers, and the interface looks very much like the standard ArcGIS Pro interface. Produces output that opens directly into ArcGIS. We also tried a free open source product called Open Drone Map, and Open Drone Map is offered by the Open Drone Map community. The software requires a Linux-based virtual operating environment, and we installed it as a standalone virtual machine using Oracle's VirtualBox. Has both command-line and web-based interfaces. We use the web-based interface for our analysis. The web-based interface only means that we use a web browser to set parameters and run the analysis. Open Drone Map software runs entirely on the machine it's mounted on. Now, we tried two different sites. The first site was this Waterbird petroglyph site, Picture Canyon near Flagstaff. It's primarily a hard rock and a vertical surface. It's kind of analogous to a hanging garden type spring. We took 38 images to construct our 3D model of Picture Canyon. Now, Picture Canyon isn't an actual spring location, but it represented what we thought would probably be the ideal scenario for structure from motion methods. Second site, Ello Spring on the Kaibab National Forest, also near Flagstaff, was a heavily vegetated site at the bottom of a drainage. Had multiple pools, had overhanging trees, lots of vegetation, and sloping topography. We took 134 images to construct a 3D model of Ello Spring, and this is actually a fairly typical spring location, maybe a little bit more flow and standing water than is normal in northern Arizona. Okay, results. First, comparing the outputs of Drone to Map with Open Drone Map. Now, in most respects, Drone to Map worked better for us than Open Drone Map. Both took roughly the same amount of time, less than an hour for both sites. Now, Open Drone Map had problems that we were unable to figure out. It wouldn't generate a 3D model of Picture Canyon at all, claiming mysteriously that the processing node is missing a program necessary to complete the task. We tried reinstalling it multiple times in different versions. We always got the same error. Now, it did generate a 3D model of Ello Spring, though, and unfortunately it only generated a 3D model for a small part of it, probably 25% of the downstream portion of Ello Spring. The upstream portion was missing from the analysis entirely. Now, the small portion it did, though, it looked pretty good, in fact did better than the Drone to Map within that limited extent. Other issues with Open Drone Map was that it would not produce a 3D model that we were able to open successfully in ArcGIS. Open Drone Map produces 3D models formatted as OBJ files, and ArcGIS does have a tool to import those kind of files. However, the coordinates in the OBJ file are in a local coordinate system, and there's just no obvious way to precisely georeference the file on the actual landscape. We could view them in lots of software, such as Windows 3D Viewer and Adobe Dimension, but we couldn't bring it into GIS and use any GIS tools on it. Open Drone Map did fine at generating a 3D point cloud. It generated a digital surface model, which shows the elevation of the vegetation. Also generated a digital terrain model, which tries to find the actual ground surface beneath the vegetation. And it made an ortho photo for the small portion of Ello Spring. Drone to Map successfully generated 3D models, point clouds, digital terrain, and surface models, and ortho photos for both sites. Drone to Map produces 3D models formatted as .slpk files using a standardized format, which are correctly georeferenced and readable directly in GIS software. So we were able to post these as web scenes so that others could view the sites on a web browser without expensive software. For example, we could look at Ello Spring in our internet browser and Picture Canyon as well. Now, how well did this whole process work? The 3D model of Picture Canyon was much, much better than the 3D model of Ello Spring. Surfaces were clear, visible, and unambiguous. And in fact, we even discovered petroglyphs in the 3D model that we had never noticed when we were actually at the site. The 3D model of Ello Spring was pretty bad and of limited use. The software appeared to have difficulty determining elevation. This is almost certainly because of the dense vegetation at the site. With millions of grasses and reeds in view, we suspect that the software was simply not able to correctly identify identical points from overlapping images. The topography generated from the 3D model of Ello Spring was useless. Interestingly, the 3D models of Ello Spring produced by Open Drone Map did not exactly line up with the Drone to Map model. The Open Drone Map model was positioned roughly 15 meters above and 5 meters to the south of the Drone to Map model. And this may be an argument for adding ground control points to the images, which we did not do. All our positions in our analysis were calculated based on the GPS coordinates of the images from the drone. Now, the Drone to Map model also suffered from a vertical artifact located in a pond. Probably the algorithms may have been confused by the reflection of the sun or just the reflectivity of the water in general. The open source Open Drone Map model did not get tripped up by this, so the Open Drone Map algorithms appeared to handle the confusion in that pond much better than Drone to Map. Now, at the end of the day, we were really pleased with the 3D models we were able to create at Picture Canyon, but very disappointed with the results at Ello Spring. And since many springs have considerable vegetation, that's kind of one of the things about springs, this bodes poorly for future structure from motion 3D models of springs in the future. And the drone was great for taking general videos and pictures, though, and while these are not precise measures of the landscape, these items do an excellent job of conveying the general conditions at a site. Well, thanks so much for your attention, everybody, and I'm open for questions.